Yeah.
All right, I would like to call to order the Monday, May 6, 2019 meeting of the Monona City Council. Will the clerk please call the roll?
All right. Alder Groupie.
Here.
Alder Moore.
Here.
Alder Kitzler.
Here.
Alder Wood.
Here.
Alder Coor. Alder Thomas. Here. Mayor O'Connor.
Here. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I'd like to welcome Alder Thomas back, sitting in the newbie spot. Okay, is there a motion to approve the minutes of both the April 15th council meeting and the April 16th reorganizational meetings? Can we do these together, Joan?
Sure.
I'll move approval.
Second.
Any corrections, additions?
I will point out that that Alder Thomas pointed out that we approved naming nights for the riverfront, so that'll be changed. That'll be
Okay.
corrected. So I thank you, Alder Thomas, for bringing that to our attention.
All in favor?
One other correction.
Oh.
Under reports, under Alder Kitzler, it talks about Cravers, it says John and Becky, and I think it should be John and Peggy.
Peggy, yeah,
Oh,
correct.
Thanks.
anything else? All in favor of approving the minutes, say aye.
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 Opposed? Minutes are approved. There are no appearances, I think. There is no public hearing. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Consent agenda is approved. Moving on to unfinished business, item G1A, consideration of resolution 19-4-2349, adopting a policy to provide a paid parental leave benefit for city employees, put forth by the Finance and Personnel Committee. Is there a motion to approve this?
Move to approve.
Second.
Second. Leah?
Mayor O'Connor. This is the second read on this policy, and since the first read a couple of weeks ago, we actually have two amendments that have been submitted to the policy, one from Alder Groupie and one from Alder Wood. Alder Groupie's amendment, you have red lines of both of these in your packet, is to include foster care as being eligible for paid parental leave under this policy, limited to one occurrence per year, regardless of how many placements, independent of the number of children placed. And then Alder Wood's amendment also adds foster care as being eligible under this policy. And in the markup has outlined all the places that foster care would be included in the policy.
I'd like to move to withdraw my amendment in support of Alder Wood's more comprehensive amendment.
Okay. Is there a second?
Second?
She can just withdraw it? Okay.
Okay.
Okay. So we are only considering Alder Wood's amendment, or leaving it the way it is?
I'll move approval of my amendment.
Second.
Any discussion or questions?
I have a question actually for Leah.
Okay.
If your reading of the language I gave you, would that also limit it to one occurrence per year? That was my intention.
That was your intention?
I thought there was somewhere else in the policy that limited it to once every.
The policy itself limits use of the policy to one time per year.
Okay.
So.
Okay, good. All right.
Alder Thomas, did you ever?
Yeah, I have to say, I've mixed emotions about including foster care. Before I retired, I worked at the Department of Health and Family Services. Child welfare was in our agency, and I, along with the rest of you, had high regard for foster parents. They do an incredible job. The question I have is, some foster care is urgent care, which is for a week. for a day, so I assume we don't want to include it for that. Many, I don't want to say most, but lots of foster parents have more than one child, so if you allow it for one child and you don't do it for the rest of the children, that seems unfair and unequal to me. And it isn't about bonding, because the purpose of foster care primarily is to give the child a home until there can be reunification with the family. And it's different than adopting and having children. It's a whole different thing. I understand that many foster parents now adopt these children, and they could then have the benefit later on, time off with their children. I just, and I talked to some people who are in the field today about whether it was a good thing. Sometimes these things are mixed bags, and they said, you know, there are situations where it can be good, a good situation. There are other times where it's not so good, and they described it as sort of a mixed bag. So I have some concerns about including foster care in it.
Nancy can go and then I'll-
Alder Moore and then Alder Groupie.
I appreciate the Alder speaking about that and her experience. And I don't know how long ago it was, Kathy, that you were in that role, but because I think I might have been the one that brought up the idea of fostering as an option. And I guess one, I would say, since this is an employee policy, I think it's fair to say that the employees of the city are a pretty stellar group of people, and so the likelihood of, I guess, of somehow somebody taking advantage of it or it not working out as best it can under what are obviously very trying circumstances, it seems to me is less. It's not like we're talking about the population at large. Number two, the national average, according to recent statistics, is that the average is 2 years for a foster placement. According to the research that I looked at, thank you, Google. And it seems to me I know that Alder Wood had brought up in the first read asking about whether or not they get paid if they are a foster parent, but it seems to me if the goal is bonding, I can't honestly say that, someone who is been brought to foster care for whatever the circumstances, whether they've lost their parents, been abandoned for some reason, or their parents are somehow are otherwise incapacitated and unable to parent. Can't think of a more important thing than being able to bond with whoever it is in the short term. I mean, it seems to me that if somebody is providing a roof over their head and a home for them, even if it's a 2-year period, rather than longer term in an adoptive situation, that the kind of support that they would need in entering a family would be certainly really important.
Alder Groupie.
I second Alder Moore's comments just about how essential it is for a new foster child to have that initial time with their family to bond. Typically, a lot of fosters are coming from traumatic experiences, which Alder Moore mentioned. But I also know, from my experience, the majority of people I know personally who have fostered are fostering for the purpose of later adopting the child that they foster. And in some cases, they're legally obligated to foster prior to being able to adopt. I know that this is covered under, I think, 6 state laws as far as paid parental leave policies. So there is a precedent at a state level, at a larger level, that we can follow here. But I also just, I think it is better to cast a wider net with our city employees for these circumstances, given that we do vet these people, we know them, and I think it's more likely an exception to the rule that anyone would try to take advantage of this policy in this way. So, one final note, I had talked in our initial conversation about including surrogates in this policy. And I've withdrawn, my desire to include them in the hopes that that will be covered under the second arm of this policy to be discussed at a future meeting.
Anyone else? Alder Kitzler.
Alderwood, thanks for proposing these amendments. I had similar concerns, I think, when I was originally working with Leah to draft this about foster care that Alder Thomas brought up. I think kind of weighing the various options and then kind of figuring out which way I'd vote on this, I'm going on the side of supporting this for multiple reasons. One reason, kind of overarching, being I think this is a good policy to start with. I think, I'm hoping that this will be, I don't want to say fluid, but something that we can look at and reanalyze as years go on, and that, different employees take advantage of this in a positive way. So, I like the addition. I'm more of the side of being inclusive. I like how he added domestic partnership and what the definition of all that means as well. One thing I did have a question, because I do remember Alder Groupie mentioning surrogacy, and a qualifying event, I know I see Alderwood including birth of by a surrogate. I don't know if we needed to go into it more in the policy initially, or Leah, if that's enough of a mention, because to me it sounds like Alderwood, at least in this case, you wanted those to be covered. I don't know if we wanted to talk a little bit more about that side of it.
That may have inadvertently been left in. I did have a draft that was going to include surrogacy and decided not to go forward with that amendment.
And where I'm looking is just under definitions.
Right, I see that.
Okay.
So, because otherwise I don't think that's really necessary to have that language in there.
I mean, under A4, under eligible employees, I think we define it pretty specifically to say employees who receive a child through a surrogate are eligible under this policy. Employees who are acting as surrogates or sperm donors are not.
Right. So I think we should probably strike that, including birth by a surrogate, in the definitions, because I think it just can lead to confusion about what we're talking about.
So do we need a friendly amendment?
This is
For that?
Who seconded? If the second is okay with taking that language out, I would be
You okay with that?
okay with that.
Yes.
Anything else? Okay, so we're voting on Alderwood's. Alder Court.
I just wanted to mention that foster care is actually covered by the federal FMLA law as a qualifying event, so follows that precedent.
So anyone else? Okay, so this is a vote on Alderwood's amendment. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Amendment passes. Do we have to go back and vote on that?
Yeah, should
We
go
do,
back
right?
and vote on
Yeah.
the original as amended.
All right, is there a motion?
there. Yeah.
Yeah, there was a motion.
There was a motion, okay. So is there any further discussion on the original motion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Next item, 19 dash, thank you, Leah. 19-4-2351. Let's see. Approving an agreement with Monona Bank for facility naming rights for an outdoor ice rink at the Riverfront Development put forth by the Parks and Rec Director. Is there a motion to approve this?
Move to approve.
Is there a second?
Second.
Jake?
Thank you, Mayor. Since our last meeting, we had a meeting of the Parks and Recreation Board to discuss the referral from this committee. There was a good discussion among the board regarding signage, overall agreement with Monona Bank, and the recommendation from the board was to have less signage on the rink boards. So absolutely no signage of Monona Bank. $1 off admission price instead of $1 for admission for Monona Bank card holders, and then Monona Bank would provide promotional material at all locations. So all of their branches would include promotional material for the river rink and the items that we would be offering there. And so those were items that were recommended, and Monona Bank is supportive of those and willing to those terms.
Discussion, Alder Groupie, and then Alder Kitzler.
I'm just curious, with the $1 off for customers, what, do we have a figure for potential revenue lost by the number of customers who would potentially be using that discount?
Not at this point. I mean, it's a fairly standard for naming rights that card holders or members of those institutions receive some sort of a discount. We have projections for overall revenue for the rink itself, but until we go through a season or two, we won't really see. But it is a way that we can track,
Okay.
certainly.
Thanks.
Alder Kitzler.
This is a small thing, but we refer to Monona Bank as MSB. Is that former Monona State Bank, and we should be really saying MB, or do they still do business as Monona State Bank?
That's
Legally.
me. I initially drafted it as Monona State Bank and used the acronym MSB. They subsequently corrected that and wanted to be known as Monona Bank. It's a defined term, so legally it doesn't matter. And rather than go through and change it, I just left it as MSB. It doesn't
Okay.
change the substance of the contract at all.
And then the only other comments I was going to say is, thanks again, Jake and Mayor and whoever else was involved in this, and of course to Monona Bank. As far as the Parks Board, I think we had a good discussion last week just about kind of parameters around naming and kind of future naming proposals. I think we learned a lot through this process. I think the adaptations, and one of the things that was included was Monona Bank also offered to essentially advertise the rink at all of their regional banks. Sorry if you already said that, but I think that is kind of a huge, marketing piece that we're getting out of this. So we did add that to the agreement as well. But I think it was a constructive conversation. I think we're at a good place. Hopefully Monona Bank thinks we're at a good place as well. So, I'm looking forward to seeing it come to fruition.
Anyone else? Alder Moore.
Yeah, it just I had two things. I agree that I was there, and I as a interested spectator, made an appearance, and I think it was a good discussion as well. Just to echo what Alder Kitzler said, this is the first time that the Parks Board could certainly remember that we have named something not after an individual but after a business, and so it does represent kind of a new direction for us as a community, which was all the more reason why I think it was good that we went through the discussion that we did, because we haven't named parks after businesses or other city facilities after businesses or the library. We've only named them after individuals, so for their service or commitment to the community. So it does represent a departure in that way. And I've totally spaced on what my second point was going to be. So, but again, I want to thank, as I did at the Parks meeting and here the last time we spoke, I want to thank everybody that's been involved in putting it together. And I knew what it was. I remembered the second thing, which was at the last meeting, Alder Wood had asked about the financial ramifications and was going to speak to Mark about that. And I'm just wondering if we ever got any, in terms of carrying the $150,000
Right.
over the 15-year period. Did we get anything?
Alder Wood Joyner.
Yes. So Mark sent an email today that assuming a 2%, I guess it's 2% discount rate, that the value of the $10,000 for 15 years would be $128,500. Which I think is roughly about 40% of the total cost of the rink, maybe not quite 40%.
Yeah, the estimated cost of the rink itself with the boards is going to be between $220 and $250. We will have additional costs for the ice resurfacer, Zamboni machine, and some, skates and pads and things like that.
Right.
But
Okay. And then he did also go through the various benefits, additional benefits they're receiving, and I think Brian, did he leave those with you, a list? And I don't know if you've seen that, Jake? or
Yep.
not.
Yep.
Um,
And these are like singular retail value numbers. So, for example, if you wanted to just do an ad, it would cost this much. If you just did,
Right.
so we do have package deals, and everything included in the list that's in the agreement is included when what we call our presenting level of sponsorship. So for a $5,000 a year, you get everything that's included in this agreement, plus all of our special events recognition at those. So it does kind of follow that same precedent as a presenting sponsor benefit. And the way we calculate that is at a significant discount for each one of those items.
Oh,
The, I
Tom?
mean,
Oh, I'm sorry.
if I just follow up, the actual value of these would be less than the values that Mark listed.
Correct.
Okay.
Yep, and if you were doing a sponsorship with Park and Rec on a kind of a couple basis, it's a package deal, so you'll get all of these for one rate, but if you tallied them all up individually, it'd be far more than what you're actually paying,
Yeah, okay,
so to speak.
right. Okay, thanks. And then I just wanted to add that I met with Jake sometime, was it last week or week before?
Yeah,
Week before, I think.
before, yeah.
And also, I unfortunately couldn't be at the Parks Board meeting, but I was glad you were able to get one together and have the discussion, so.
Alder Thomas.
Yeah, I just wanted to thank Jake, because when this first came up, the bank donates to the festival, the parade, the library, the senior center, the education foundation, and I think there was some concern about whether or not they would lose on that, but because Jake or whoever negotiated is good about that, and because the bank is such good community partners, we have been assured that they will continue to contribute to all the events that they've done in the past, which is a really good thing.
That's good news. Anyone else? Alder Moore.
Well, I was just going to say, to go back to Jake's point about the retail value, weren't you saying that this package ordinarily, this bucket of things that you would give to people, would ordinarily be for a $5,000? Or value of $5,000 as opposed to $5,185, if you will?
Yeah, so for example, if you were to do a yearly, if you wanted to be the Park and Rec presenting sponsor, for $5,000, you get a lot. This bucket plus recognition at all of our special events that we have, so the
Okay.
Fall Festival and the Easter egg hunt. So if you added up individually all of those retail values of, say, a sponsorship at an event, plus an ad, plus
Right.
a foursome at Mulligan's, that retail value is far greater than what someone would pay for a bundle deal.
Right.
So it's, discounted. The more you purchase,
Yeah.
each individual item is discounted more.
Anyone else? Okay. If there aren't any other questions, all in favor say aye.
I'm sorry, could I, just a point of order, I guess, we have, I think, 3 different versions of the
Oh.
agreement in our packet, and I think the one, is it the last one?
Does the top one have all of the red lines in it?
The top one is the one
Okay.
that incorporates the red lines, yes.
The one with the resolution, right after the.
Correct,
Yeah.
correct.
Okay.
So that's what we're voting on.
Correct.
Correct.
All right, thank you.
I think we handled the changes in two different time periods, right? All right, any other questions? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes, thank you.
Thank you.
Item G2A, under new business, consideration of ordinance 5-19-716, amending the code of ordinances regarding false building alarms, put forth by the police chief. Scott, you're going to address this?
Yeah, I'm here, while it was busy, so, we went through this at Public Safety. Wally and I have talked about this for a while. Part of the issue here was that, when we did the recodification of the city ordinance, for some reason, the police department's false alarm ordinance was not carried forth to the current city ordinance. The fire department one was, so we wanted to get the police departments in the new ordinance. They pretty much mirror each other with the exception of the fire department's has, if it's more than 3 false alarms in 12 months. The police department is 3 false alarms within 60 days. The other change that we put forth, Public Safety put forth, was instead of $100 standard fee for each offense, we're doing an escalated. So basically, the 4th false alarm within a month, or for us, within the year, would be $100. The 5th would be $250, and the 6th would be $500. Kind of give you an example. So in the almost 10 years that I've been here, we have not issued a citation for that. It does give us the teeth behind it to say, if you don't get it fixed, you will receive a citation for this. So Wally stated that they also don't have a lot of false alarms with this, but it does give them the ability to cite if there are multiple false alarms. One of the things that was brought up at Public Safety was the school. Do we ticket the school? We don't ticket the school. We have ticketed individuals, students that have pulled the alarm. That is a very good deterrent. It goes around the school pretty quick. And it's very helpful for us. There again, it's not the school that gets ticketed, it's the individual that does it. And depending on if it's a landlord situation, if it's a problem with the alarm system in the building, the owner of the building gets the ticket. If it's a tenant that continues to have issues with, they continue to burn popcorn or do something that sets off the alarm multiple times, it would be the tenant then that would get the ticket. But like I said, we haven't issued any since I've been here. We have done the school false alarms, but that they do under a disorderly conduct as opposed to the alarm. So.
Questions? Alder Groupie.
Just pertinent to Scott's mention, I'm sorry, Chief Sullivan's mention of the school offenses was sort of my reservation that I didn't know how widely publicized, either by the school or school resource officer, the penalties and fees were for students. And I appreciated the tiered level of fines for that particular reason, because often I would assume that it's not the student themselves, but their family or parents who would need to pay a $500 fine for the very first offense for this. And I appreciated the discussion, and I feel much more comfortable with the idea of doing it this way, in addition to hoping that it'll be something that's a little bit more widely publicized for all students at orientation or after an alarm is pulled falsely, just so all students are aware that this is what will happen.
Anyone else? Thank you.
Thank you.
Next item 2B, consideration of ordinance 5-19-717, amending chapter 480, article 12, of the Code of Ordinances regarding signage regulations, put forth by the Plan Commission. We have a couple of representatives. we worked on it here. We're going to, do you have a presentation or?
We were just going to speak to the memo that's in.
Okay.
I'm Mike Slavny, and this is Ben Rohr from Vanderwall and Associates. And we're the consultants who've been working with the Plan Commission on the rewrite of the sign code. When we started the project, the objective was to contend with the U.S. Supreme Court decision that said you can't regulate signs based on their content. And almost all of your ordinance, as well as every other sign code in the country, was written that way. And I thought we were primarily going to be taking your current rules and putting them into a new format. And I think we accomplished that. But in the process, I think we also added documentation of a lot of the unwritten but consistently applied interpretations and responses to unusual circumstances that your staff had applied over the years and that the Plan Commission had worked with. And that's something we couldn't have done as folks who specialize in ordinance writing but not in Monona. And so I wanted to thank the Plan Commission members and our steering committee that included Alders Moore and Thomas, as well as Chris Homburg. We made a lot of pragmatic improvements to the code, and I think we've got something that it'll be easier to look up the requirements for, and we got rid of the map that was very hard to interpret. So I think we have something that reflects your practices over the years, and at the same time expands some opportunities for frequently used business signs in other communities that your old code really hadn't accommodated before, that are mainly oriented to pedestrian traffic. So I think overall we, through a team effort, have an improved product for you. Ben has a few details to talk about.
Yeah, so essentially this was a culmination of a year-long back and forth iterative process that Mike has just described between the Plan Commission, a sub-project committee of the Plan Commission, us, city staff, and the public. And so you can see the series of events there. Started last spring with a kickoff meeting and went back and forth, multiple different working sessions with that subcommittee with the Plan Commission. I think we came to 4 Plan Commission meetings. 3 of those were heavily involved working sessions where we went back and forth with the group and held a public open house to present the draft back in January and received a recommendation from the Plan Commission last March. And like Mike had said, basically we came in with a model that is legally fits that Reed versus, or that Reed decision, and we thought we were going to customize it, and then it turned into a very, very great relationship with the Plan Commission, I thought, back and forth, where we really got into the weeds and we got into the details and we figured out how to customize this thing to fit exactly what the Plan Commission from Monona wanted. And I think it ultimately will serve as a tool that will be easier to interpret, easier to apply, and more consistent to apply. I also believe that it'll be easier from a user standpoint because of the graphics and the visual elements and the summarization of information within tables. Basically, I think the work that a lot of individuals in this room have done to make this code what it is today is really going to pay off in the long run. I think you guys have a great end product here that we really didn't change a ton of the location, the size, the standard kind of rules. We really customized it to fit those rules and while also modernizing it, making it more legally defensible, and increasing the user friendliness. So if there is specific questions on anything within the ordinance, we'd be happy to answer those.
Can you
Thomas?
cite a couple of the user-friendly
Yeah.
modifications that we made?
Mhm. Oh, yes. We took the 4 large kind of overarching sign categories and built a whole table around those. So they have on that table examples of what those signs might look like. They have where those signs are allowed, the formula to figure out how to calculate the maximum size sign that you can have. Tells you the exact process of how to get from A to B to C. Tells you what group you need to talk to, whether it's, do you need a permit at all? Do you need to go to staff? Do you need to go to planning commission? And all of these things make it so in the existing code, someone would go and have to interpret those and find those different areas, and we summarize them in an attempt to make it more user-friendly. And additionally, we put in a lot of different kind of figures and graphics to explain how measuring signs is applied and things along those lines to clear up that interpretation as well.
Did we make the code in terms of the signs? Did we apply restrictions that we didn't have before, or did we loosen up and add some things that would benefit the businesses?
Yeah, we added several new kinds of pedestrian signs that heretofore weren't available under the code. And then we clarified a couple of things that you'd been consistently interpreting, but weren't written in the code. For example, in addition to the business signage, you could have a logo as part of the signage that didn't count as an extra sign. Striping on canopies for things like gas stations weren't directly addressed in the code, but you've been consistently allowing them with some limitations. So those are all now in writing in the code, and when staff turns over or business ownership turns over, those rules will be easy to find, not hard to discover.
Anyone else? Alderwood.
Just wondering if the staff, city attorney, or this planning staff had any comments on any parts of it?
Nothing more than it's an improvement. Having briefly worked with the old one, looking through this, I echo the points of how much more user-friendly it is. And I think the graphics are a significant improvement.
I did review the draft, made several changes, discussed them with Mr. Slavny. They were incorporated into the draft and approved by Plan Commission, with 2 exceptions that were approved over my objections. There are 2. The first one, they're listed in your memo. Defining commercial miscellaneous signs.
I think it's on page 67.
Yeah, it defines temporary miscellaneous sign as a temporary sign that does not contain a commercial message. So in order to determine if something's a temporary miscellaneous sign, you have to look as to whether or not it contains a commercial message, which means you have to read the message, which makes it not content neutral. It's a content-based regulation, which is the whole point of Reed v. Gilbert. You can't have content-based regulation in this context. For that reason, I recommended deletion of the requirement that it not contain a commercial message. Leaving that in my opinion, would be contrary to Reed v. Gilbert and make it, at least that provision of it, indefensible. The second change is at figure 480-70. My version isn't paginated. It's the chart that limits political signs. It limits it in 2 ways. One, it limits the number to 1 yard sign per candidate or 2 yard signs per each referendum issue. It also limits it temporally to 30 days prior to, up to 7 days after the election. With respect to the temporal limitation, those have been declared unconstitutional by dozens of courts. The one principally in Wisconsin is called Fedorowicz versus City of Pewaukee. It basically said you can't limit these things. If somebody wants to put up a impeach Scott Walker sign, they can have the thing up 365 days a year if they want. Admittedly, the Fedorowicz case is a Western District case, and it was decided on summary judgment. So it is not binding in the Western District as precedent. As I say, though, that case is consistent with cases from throughout the country that basically say you can't have these time limits. The limit as to the number of signs, the courts do say that, you know, clutter and that sort of thing is a legitimate municipal objective, and you can regulate that. There's only one case that I've found that limits the numbers. Again, it's an out-of-state case. It's not binding in our jurisdiction. It found the limitation unconstitutional. Principally, they basically said it's too narrowly tailored because you could have 4 people living in a household that back 4 different candidates. Each one of those residents has the right to back different candidates. So it didn't allow the number in that context. The sort of commentators on this say the same thing, but again, there's no case law on it. For that reason, the communities that I'm aware that do want to regulate that, regulate it by size. Basically, the going norm tends to be 32 square inches, I want to say, maybe it's feet, cumulatively. So if somebody wants to divide it up into a bunch of small ones, they can, or they can have one large one. For that reason, I recommended deletion of that provision as well. Political signs are a litigation nightmare. People have, when it comes to free speech, political speech is particularly protected. Much more so when you're talking about political speech in your residence. It's very difficult to regulate that, and it's not consistent with at least the case law that's out there. So for that reason, I wouldn't say it's absolutely indefensible, the number of signs. The time period clearly is. I mean, that would be overturned. The number of signs, maybe it would be sustained. My professional judgment says no, it wouldn't be. I think you're walking into a quagmire trying to limit political signs and political speech that way. So for that reason, I recommended deletion of that as well. Those two, notwithstanding my objection, were passed by the Plan Commission and are in the proposal before you.
Do you want to address that, or do you want?
Well, I'm going to address part of it. The second part of it, which is to say, the referencing, let's say, a family of 4 that all has different candidates. This sign code would not at all prohibit them from having 4 different signs, because they all have
Not
different
as to
candidates they
candidates,
support.
But as to referenda issues, it would. They get 2 signs per referenda issue. So if you had a 4-part referendum issue, and you had 4 people that lived there that all had different opinions, 2 people could have their signs up.
Wouldn't that be 4 issues?
I suppose it depends on how you would define issue.
But indeed it does.
Right, well, yeah, you're right as to the candidates. You're entitled to 1 sign per candidate, and each person could put a sign up. You still have I think the concern the courts have said, one that was on it, that if somebody really likes their candidate, they're entitled to, in a signage equivalent, scream as opposed to softly whisper. And if they want to put 4 signs up instead of 2, that's their right under the First Amendment.
Alder Thomas.
I think when we discussed this, and correct me if I'm misinterpreting this, when Plan Commission discussed this, we talked about, what do we hear from the community and what are the community values, and do we want 27 signs running down your front yard for candidates? And we said no. And what we also said, because we had amateur legal people in the room, sometimes you put the ordinance in, and if somebody raises the issue, we say, whoops, sorry, we'll have to change the ordinance, and we won't. And we won't take this, go to the wall with this, but we think that it's reasonable to have a standard, and if somebody objects to it and raises a fuss about it, then we'll probably have to change it. Is that sort of a fair way of?
That was more succinct than I would have described it, yes. It's fair.
The problem with that, with regard to these type of
And we have
prior
such a good lawyer.
mistakes- Well, it's your decision as to whether you pass or not. The concern I have is obviously if and when it's challenged, whatever mayor at the time is presumably going to turn to me, say, Cole, take care of this and you better win. So now is the time for me to raise these concerns. I would caution you, though, that it's not a type of situation where you say, well, if a judge tells us to change it, we'll just change it. Fedorowicz is the perfect example. The plaintiff in that case was awarded fees, attorney's fees, in a fairly significant amount, and they didn't even go through trial. That was just decided on summary judgment. So, I mean, I'm not saying it's a gigantic punitive sanction, but there could be monetary downfalls to the city over and above just simply changing the ordinance.
$1,000, $10,000.
I don't know. Federal litigation, you're always talking at least tens of thousands, if not hundreds.
Okay.
Nancy?
Is it not the case that to go back to the stake sign again, as it relates to the political signs, to use your example, impeach Scott Walker or whatever, it seems to me that what we're talking about in the sign code is not what somebody could do in their home, which is to say if I wanted to put an impeach Scott Walker in my window, I could do that. It just means you can't put 1 or 6 impeach Scott Walkers in the middle of my yard.
That's true. You're addressing the location of the sign. The problem, and Reed v. Gilbert makes this clear, is you're dealing with the level of deference that the court is going to look at, and you can't just say, well, they have an alternative method to make their speech. We let them put the thing in the window. It has to be least restrictive and narrowly tailored to the government objective. The government objective presumably is to avoid the aesthetic clutter on the lawns. And again, there's no science in this. I mean, it's not like I can tell you what the answer is, particularly since no court in this jurisdiction has ruled on this. I think it would be a tough argument to make to a judge if somebody says, I am very sincere in my belief that this candidate should win, and I want to put signs in my front yard to do that, and the city of Monona is not going to let me put them in my yard. They're only going to let me put 1 there, but they'll let me put a bunch in my window. I don't think that is the least restrictive method narrowly tailored to your objective. I think, honestly, that's why the communities do go with the signs. You hit your 32 square feet. If you want to divvy it up into 12 tiny signs, that's fine. But you only get 1 cumulative size, and that's what addresses the city's concern about clutter.
Alder Wood?
So, yeah, I have a real problem with telling people, telling me I can't put signs, political signs in my yard. And I think my interest in political expression outweighs the city's interest. And if you're gonna tell me I can only have one, and, you know, even though I feel strongly about something, or I have to take it down after whatever the time limit's, 30 and 7 days are, I don't, yeah, I don't think the city's interest outweigh individuals' freedom of expression interests. And I also don't think we should adopt an ordinance with language in it that we don't believe is constitutional.
Anyone else? No?
Otherwise, I really appreciate all the incredible amount of work that went into this, so I don't want to get lost in this discussion about this one point. But
Alder Thomas?
So how do you want to fix this in terms of addressing, do you want the plan commission to go back and look at fixing this? The things that the attorney has raised questions about, you know, taking a look at the size if they want to, or how do you want it? Because clearly, he's pretty certain that that what we're doing, part of it is not right and we need to fix it.
So we could either do that or have an amendment proposed, is that right?
Right, I guess what I'd suggest, since this is first reading, I can prepare language for your next meeting, for the second reading. You can review that, and then this body can decide whether or not they would like to refer it back to Plan Commission or just take action at the next meeting.
Yeah, I mean, I clearly, one of the things that when Plan Commission looked at this, everybody sort of thought about what they had heard comments on from people in their neighborhood, and clearly people had raised a lot of concerns about, I mean, whether it's the political signs and whether you can have 10 political signs for a person in your yard or 20, I mean, whether you limit those. And I don't know if you, I mean, we did limit them. And whether the council, I have no idea where the council wants to go on this in terms of if they all agree with then the Plan Commission. The Plan Commission will be where it's at, and we can, I suppose, amend it to what we want to do.
Andy?
So, I'm trying to get my head around, so we can't limit the number of signs, but we can limit the square inches? And how is that defensible? I mean, how can somebody not similarly argue, well, you're muting my voice by only allowing me, whatever, 2 inches, we'll say, and not 5 inches?
Admittedly, when you get into this free speech case law,
We were tough.
you start splitting hairs.
Yeah.
Admittedly, and your point's well taken. I can't limit the number, but I can limit the size. And I can't give you a good answer other than the hair split that way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I guess, and that question is kind of based on, I mean, I see where Alder Thomas and, you know, others she's talked to about, you know, some of the streets, and I'm thinking of all the please slow down. I mean, there was a point where some yards had 5 of those please slow down signs in there. And at some point, and maybe this is a dumb comparison, but I think about, didn't we enact an ordinance maybe 4 years ago about the number of vehicles that we can have parked, or where they can be parked in a piece of property? And so if I'm going to take this to an extreme, if I love Ford and I want 3 Ford trucks on my front yard, how is that not limiting my speech? Is it just because it's not political? But anyways, so I mean, I do want to try to grapple with how can we, I don't want to say limit speech, but how do we how do we limit the nuisance of signs?
The multiple signs on yards is admittedly an issue, a proper concern of the community. I don't mean to take away anything like that. Like so much of this free speech stuff, though, it's not that it's not a valid concern for the city. It's constitutionally, can you prohibit it, even though you don't like it?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And that's the rub, and that's where I just need to do my job and say, not to take anything away from the public's concern, because I see the signs as much as everybody else, but I think it's a real problem to limit the number of the signs.
Okay.
Jennifer?
Attorney Cole, is it true that if a neighborhood association or if there was a essentially some formalized neighborhood group that all residents were a part of, members, essentially, like I'm thinking like a condo association, but essentially if we had this association that was similar within Monona, they could adopt restrictions based on number of signs or where the signs are placed.
Right.
And that's defensible as opposed to
Yep.
what we're discussing.
Right, if you have a condominium, that they will have condominium bylaws and rules, which are effectively a private contract of people buying into the condo. Same with subdivisions, you can have a subdivision that has restrictive covenants. And when you buy that property, those covenants run with that land and you voluntarily acquiesce to those rules. Those are absolutely defensible, and they can do that sort of stuff. The difference there is those are private restrictions, not governmental restrictions. The Bill of Rights restricts government action, it doesn't restrict private action.
One follow-up. If a group such as a condo association, do they have to create those bylaws at the time that they're created, or is it something like if I had a neighborhood association that suddenly adopted this after I've already purchased my property, would that be enforceable?
You can amend them. It's done from time to time. I think the problem most places encounter is the level of, the voting level to accomplish an amendment. In most subdivisions and condominiums, you're looking at, well, covenants, unless there's something in the covenant that allows for lesser, it has to be unanimous. So if you have 200 people in your subdivision, every single person has to agree to it. Same with a condo, unless the current bylaws allow an amendment at a lesser vote. So it's more of it certainly is permissible, it's legal, it's the practical impediment of getting sufficient votes to amend it.
Thanks for humoring me.
What's that?
I said thanks for humoring me.
Oh, yeah, sure.
Alderman Moore?
As somebody who has lived in a condo, I don't think I would humoring you at all. I think it's a really good question. I am very well aware of how that works. I was going to say that we do have a plan commission meeting next Monday. So if this body felt a need to kick it back to plan, it may be, we have not sent out the agenda yet. We could conceivably add it to the agenda if you want the plan commission to review language that Attorney Cole would write, if it's that's a possibility. Just want to point that out.
Didn't the Plan Commission already have the city attorney's recommendations when the vote was made to pass it the way it is?
We did, and we, as Attorney Cole pointed out, the commission took the vast majority of his recommendations, and these were the only two that weren't taken, and Kathy and I have done our best in the absence of digging through our minutes, which we could do, but it wouldn't serve our purpose right now, as to, we've done our best to articulate why we went the direction that we went and decided to go.
Right, no,
we didn't have Attorney Cole arguing his case. We only had his case notes, and we weighed them very seriously in the commission and decided to go this direction instead. So,
In defense of the plan commission too,
Yeah.
they didn't have proposed language this size. I don't believe.
We never looked at the issue of one of the ways you can limit it is by size.
for sure. Correct.
This was the only tool we thought we had, and we said, I mean, we really believe, the people there really believe that that's a, and again, this slow down, whatever, you know, and they put advertising underneath them, and they're all over town, and people were just had heard a lot of that from their neighbors and saying, can't you do something about this? Why is this allowed?
Is that covered under a different part of the code, though? Those kind of signs as opposed to political signs?
You would know better, but I
Right.
believe
So-
so.
The slow down signs as opposed to the political signs?
So rather than regulating by content,
Right.
Right.
we said that everybody gets 1 yard sign all year round. And it can be a for sale sign, a garage sale sign, an open house sign. It could be, stand up for the flag or some other kind of political
Hug the mayor.
speech. You get one per year, and the exception is campaign time. And that's where we expanded the number, but didn't talk about the total area of signage.
So that is covered under a
Right,
separate.
and we limited commercial speech, which some courts now have upheld. Off-premise commercial speech not being allowed in those decisions. We talked about that, and you made the decision that mixing a political message, a policy message with commercial sponsorship is something that's run amok here several times, and you wanted to allow the policy message, but not allow commercial signage in residential zoning districts.
Doug?
I just am wondering whether, though limiting, the signs that say slow down, I suppose that's a political expression of certainly freedom and expression of what you think people should be doing when they drive past your house. Is that subject to the same legal arguments?
Yeah, I think I would say that certainly speech, it's debatable as to whether or not it's political speech. I
Yeah.
would say it's probably not political speech. So it's
Okay.
it's protected, but it's not protected to the degree
Right.
that political speech is.
Andrew? Or Brian?
Mr. Slavy, question for you. It's been my experience as a city planner that when you rewrite an ordinance or you write an ordinance for the first time, you try to write it for about 90% of the situations, knowing that about 10% of the time you're going to get things that you weren't able to contemplate. So given that, is there something in this code that would allow for, whether it's a variance or an exception procedure, so if somebody felt like they were not able to do the type of signage that they'd like to under the code, they can make application before the plan commission or another body for that?
It is subject to variances, but I would say that I think the best approach would be to amend the code if it looked like it would apply in a lot of different situations, whereas Wisconsin variance law, is supposed to be very particular to a specific property's unique circumstances.
Thank you.
Anyone else? I just have one further, just to clarify on this, the question of not political yard signs, but other signs. I have one of these clean your storm drain signs in my yard, about 6 or 8 months of the year. So does that mean I'm just limited to that sign and I can't, if I'm gonna have a yard sale or something, I have to take that out to put a yard sale sign out?
Yes, what we did do is initially we had a limit on those of 3 square feet, and through the commission's work, we increased that area to 6 total square feet. But
So
the
that's
cons-
one of these things where you measure the sign?
Yeah, so
Is
the
that what you-
consensus was, though, any sign in a residential property's yard should be limited to one at a time, except under the current draft for campaign signs.
But to answer the mayor's
How does the
question.
6 square, yeah.
Right, as the mayor says, though, your non-political signs, you get one. So if she has a Save the Drain sign up, and she wants to have a yard sale, she needs to swap them, so there's only one at a time on her yard.
Correct.
Well, I think that's going to be kind of interesting to enforce.
Well, if I could, you know, we've written about a dozen of these post-read, and that's held up. But the issue of campaign signs, every community has taken a different approach to, and I think because of the concerns that Bill talked about, it's a different kind of issue.
Alder Kitzler and then Alder Moore.
Oh, sorry. I actually had a clarification question. So we received an email in our packet from the MESBA executive director, and I just wanted to make sure her point and then my understanding of it is correct. So as we think about new developments or different things like that, say along Monona Drive, and if we have a business that has a setback such as Fairway Glen, so it's pretty close to the road, and so the parking lot's in the back, how our sign code is, am I correct in thinking they would not allow a sign to show on the street side and then a sign to show on the parking lot side?
It's not true.
Yeah, okay.
Sorry, that's not true. If you have, according to this code, if you have two sides, if you will, you're allowed two signs.
If it fronts on two streets.
Right.
But is a parking lot a street though? I
Yeah,
mean,
we actually adapted this to make sure that it included parking lot as well.
Okay, thanks.
And we can make exceptions if there are unique circumstances.
Okay, thanks.
Alder Moore.
I was just going to go back to the the political signage again. I want to clarify that certainly my read of the stake signs as it relates to politics specifically articulates around the electoral signage. It does not say political signage. It says electoral signage. There's a difference. So if I want my one side that sign that I'm allowed to have for the year to say, you know, impeach Scott Walker, I can do that. There's nothing preventing me from do that. I get one sign in my yard, it can say pretty much anything I want it to say, and it can be there all year round. We're just saying you can't leave vote for Scott Walker up year round. That's it. So, I mean, and we do, so we're not, you know, I just want to clarify between speech, political speech, and an electoral, because we address electoral in this, but not otherwise free speech.
Yeah, that's fair. Political speech is a subset of speech.
Mm-hmm.
Electoral speech would be a subset of political speech.
Right, but I'm just saying of the purpose, we don't even use the word political in this document. What we refer to specifically in the document is for electoral purposes only, a maximum of 1 yard sign or 2 per referendum. So it's only during elections that we talk about taking something up and removing it within 7 days and all that. So yeah.
Admittedly, but when you're talking about electoral speech, by definition, you're talking about political speech, because it is a subset of political speech.
But if we're not defining political speech in the document, how can it be a subset?
As a matter of law, it is. You're talking about speech regarding candidates for election. That is a type of political speech.
Okay. So even though, so we say for electoral purposes, we're talking about elections, even though we say for electoral processes only as our footnote.
Right.
It doesn't
still-
matter.
It's still a type of political speech, no matter what you call it.
Anyone else? Well, how would you like to handle this? Do you want it, Bill, to put together some language we can consider at the next council meeting, or would you like it to go to plan first?
I guess I would defer to what the plan commission members would like to do.
Is it, Bill, is it possible for you to do something for the next
Yeah.
meeting? I mean, and there is
Yeah,
no, I
meeting, you
mean, are we in a rush on this? So if it takes us another month longer, is that,
You're going to have to live with it a long time, and I think you need to take the time.
so
Okay.
take your time and write something and then take it to us, because we don't have to rush it for the next meeting, right? We could
Take it to plan commission or bring it back to the council?
take it to plan and
Okay. Alderman Moore.
So can I just, I'd like to amend that, Ms. Chair, is to say, if you can get something by the next meeting, since we haven't sent the agenda out yet, that would be a preference, because the following meeting is Memorial Day, and as of right now, we don't have an agenda, and it is a holiday, so rather than reschedule that meeting around this particular issue and waiting all the way until halfway through June to get a first read or your language, if you could get something to us on Monday, that would be, probably be a preference.
I'll get you some.
Okay. So do we need to have a motion to send it to the plan commission?
No, this is first read, so I don't think there needs to be a motion.
No, I would say just leave it on, it's first read, leave it the way it is. Plan commission can certainly put whatever they want on their agenda. They'll have my language, and then if they wish to provide input to the council for second reading, they certainly can.
All right, that's what we'll leave it at. Anyone else? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Next up, item 2C, update and discussion of sustainability work plan. Brad?
Thank you. So you have a memo that highlights and summarizes progress made in 2018 towards sustainability initiatives and efforts. I'm just going to run through the memo, kind of highlight some key topics, then open it up for any questions that you guys may have. Last year was a busy year for the Sustainability Committee. We had a lot of initiatives, a lot of planning happened last year. Recap is in your memo. A part of this material is our Green Tier Legacy Community Annual Report, which is a requirement of the city as part of our charter with Green Tier Legacy communities. Also in here is a first of its kind for the city. It's like a sustainability dashboard. Summarizes and recaps progress made. The goal would be to update this on a yearly basis and present it to council every spring. So, I mean, given that, I could just open it up for questions. If you have any questions after the meeting and you haven't had time to go through all the content in the report, I'm always available. So I don't want to take up too much of everybody's time. Most of everything in here is summarized pretty well in the memo and in the report and the dashboard itself.
Anyone? Alderman Moore?
Yeah, I would just say, on behalf of the committee and certainly the city, I'd like to thank Brad for all the effort that goes in, and Caden, all the effort that goes into putting together the score sheet that Green Tier requires of us. As you can see, it's quite lengthy. A lot of detail, and it's no small feat, and as has been reported previously, Monona's considerably ahead of the curve in terms of tracking a lot of this data in comparison to some of our fellow cities, particularly as it relates to, for instance, the planning grant that we have with OEI currently. The fact that we've been tracking a lot of this data for a while, once again, is a demonstration of our leadership. I'd also like to thank the staff, as well as the committee, but the staff for putting together this dashboard that you see in front of you, and I'm looking forward to seeing all the graphs move. Continue to move over the next few years.
Anyone else? Alder Kitzler.
Similarly, I'll echo Alder Moore's, gratitude for all your work. Brad, you do a lot throughout the city, and certainly, this is no small part, even though it's supposed to be a smaller part of your job responsibilities. And, I really enjoyed the update. I would also, encourage the committee and encourage you to look at, adapting, learning from, the leaf management or different initiatives that you've taken and seeing how you can, make it broader or make it more impactful. Again, I just think of the leaves because where I live, it seems very, what do I want to say, abundant and as a problem. But as you kind of think of those initiatives and those little things, like not little things, but those types of initiatives that you can tackle, I say go ahead and do them. And I think the leaf management one is a great example of the committee coming together and then you executing on that. So, thanks, and I look forward to seeing more of the same.
Alder Moore.
So, since Brad didn't mention it, I also want to share that you may recall that in the 2019, we are in 2019, and the 2019 budget, this council approved $4,000 for the Sustainability Committee for this year. And at the time, we were still negotiating how that money was going to be used most effectively, and we have in fact decided to launch several major initiatives with those funds, the first of which were mentioned several times in budget deliberations, which is that we're signing a contract with Renew Wisconsin for a very small amount of money out of that budget to run what will be a group buy for solar for residents and businesses. We'll be joining what's called Maddie Sun, which actually applies to Madison as well as to Middleton and now to Monona. And that's, again, for residents and businesses to be able to group purchase solar. And there'll be some upcoming information sessions related to that. But Renew Wisconsin, who you all have heard from before because they're really our state experts in this area, will be managing the whole program, so we don't have to do any of it. Since we have limited staff time, and then we're also going to be launching a major community-wide campaign to increase both energy efficiency and the use of renewable resources at the residential and business level through things like focus on energy, energy audits for people's homes, Green Power Tomorrow, and shared solar, all of which are programs that are already offered by a utility, but very few people take advantage of.
So are you going to be using the funds to promote those? Is that what you're saying?
Yes, we're going to be using, because many people have gone paperless these days. You may recall when you get your MGE bill in the mail, or if you used to get it in the mail, they would have a flyer in just about every bill that you got. But the reality is that a lot of people don't get paper bills anymore, and so they don't necessarily know how effective those programs are, and they may not be aware of it. And And in fact, according to MGE, only about 3% of their customers take advantage of Green Power Tomorrow as an example, which is tiny. So we're going to be working with MG&E to get a count of where Monona's at on that and be encouraging our businesses in the community again to take advantage of the programs that are already out there that LILAC's aware of. And in concert with that campaign, we're also going to be sponsoring our first energy showcase in collaboration with the National Night Out that the police department's already doing, where we're going to be bringing in the best and the brightest vendors in the energy sector to enable residents to see what's going on out there and what's coming up the pike in terms of everything from electric cars to energy efficiency in their homes, and hopefully we'll include a showcase, a tour, like the Parade of Homes. It'll be the parade of renewable and energy efficient homes, if you will, so that so residents can see what their neighbors are doing and what kinds of things are possible. So.
Anyone else?
I'd like to mention one quick thing I just realized, and I saw it on here that I didn't say before, but I probably should for the record. Under stormwater and water loss, it says that usage at municipal facilities rose by 635,000 gallons of water use. Pretty sure that's not accurate. I think that there's a decimal point or something off on that, so I'll have to edit that and resend to everybody in the meeting. But other than that, yeah. Oh, and by the way, I think that storm drain signs, isn't that a political message, technically?
No.
No? Oh.
I have to find mine. I just have one other question about the, you said 7.6. I'm looking at the dashboard, the percentage of municipal electricity derived from renewable sources, and 7.6% of it is generated by the solar panels. That's dropped, hasn't it? From
Yeah.
what was its high point?
It was at about 9.2% 2 years ago, and it's a matter of how much energy we use too. So it's always going to move. That point is going to be somewhere between 7 and 9, most likely in any given year. But we did have issues with the panels. They weren't functioning properly. We had an estimate of a 10% reduction in power. So they made some fairly significant repairs just lately. After we had to ask them about it, and they came and did an inspection. Now those repairs are made. It's back up and functioning at full capacity. So we should see those numbers increase a lot this year. And not to mention, you pair that with the LED project that we did, and we should see some fairly significant gains in terms of percentage of our electricity usage from renewable energy.
Anyone else? Okay, thank you very much,
Thank
Brad,
you.
for this and all the work you put in on sustainability.
Like I said, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out. And I probably have the data.
Next item, D, consideration of resolution 19-5-2353, approval of electric distribution facilities relocation agreement for Bridge Road reconstruction project put forth by the city administrator.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This resolution and the one following it are interrelated. This first resolution is really allowing for authorization for MG&E's electrical work that's going to be undergrounded with the Bridge Road construction project. The total dollar amount for that is $378,611. So if you approve that tonight, if you move that forward to a second reading for our meeting on the 20th, we'll move forward with that. Related to that, which we'll get to in just a moment, is a capital budget amendment requesting an additional about $5,750,000. And the reason for that budget amendment request is because we had estimates established about a year out for what all the utility undergrounding would be for Bridge Road. When we got a little bit closer to the project, we went out to bid for that, got the bids back for the work. Some of them came back a little bit lower. Charter and I believe AT&T came back a little bit under the estimate. I believe the MG&E one came in a little bit higher. So the $410,000 We're short about $5,000 for that, so that's why the capital budget amendment is the next resolution after that. So, if you have to take any questions that you might have in this item. And just to note, I believe it was mentioned in the materials, we originally contemplated going through this as part of the setup for TIF District Number 9. The project plan included kind of the contemplation that we'd be doing the undergrounding for Bridge Road.
Questions, anyone? No? Okay, then the next item, consideration of resolution 19-5-2354, amending the 2019 capital budget to complete private utility undergrounding on Bridge Road, also put forth by the city administrator. And
Yeah, the only thing to add to that,
expand on
again,
that.
the exact dollar amount, the difference that we'd be requesting for the capital budget amendment would be $5,756.46. The bulk of the cost for the undergrounding, the $410,000, that would be covered through TIF District Number 9. That additional $5,000 and change that we're discussing, we would cover that amount through some savings through the HVAC City Hall Library Fund, so that's where that's being taken care of. And that's all discussed in the fiscal note that's included in the packet.
Questions, anyone? Alder Thomas?
Is there a reason you didn't take the excess out of TIF?
I'd have to check with Mark, but I think we are getting pretty close to the break-even point on
Okay.
TIF 9, so we just want to give ourselves a little breathing room.
Thank you.
Anything else? Okay. We will move on to reports of committees, commissions, boards, mayor, etc. Alder Thomas, I guess
I
we'll
have
let
no
you
report.
start. Alder Court.
WVMO had an absolutely bang-up experience at the Wisconsin Broadcasters Association Awards on Saturday evening. We were competing in a large market category, which included all the commercial stations from Milwaukee, all the commercial stations from Madison, and we won 4 first-place awards. One for a live remote broadcast from the Wife Carry event, one for best sports coverage for the high school football games, one for a birding report, and for the best use of social media, which is pretty amazing. We have a volunteer that does all of our social media, and she's just fantastic. And then the best, the creme de la creme, was that we won Station of the Year.
It's amazing.
So my kudos go to all of the volunteers and our amazing Monona Community Media group. They just go above and beyond to make us look good.
It's very exciting. Alder Wood.
This Wednesday at 6 o'clock here in the library, Joe DeRose from the Wisconsin Historical Society is going to be speaking on what makes a historic place. So he's going to be talking about the National Register of Historic Places and how you can help preserve history and save money.
Alder Kitzler.
Oh, I should mention, because I had mentioned it at the previous meeting, we are planning to do a dedication of the state historical marker for the Monona Mound, and we had planned to do that on May 18th. Due to a health issue with one of the speakers, that's been postponed, and we haven't set a new date yet, but we will be doing that. We do have the plaque, and I think it will be on display hopefully at the library possibly later this week or next week.
Alder Kitzler.
No report.
Alder Moore.
I would just like to say that despite what people might be thinking as they look outside at the rain the last few weeks, spring has truly arrived, and the 2 data points that I always use are A, the Orioles are back in my yard, and B, the ice cream shop has been open. So for those people in Monona that have been waiting, they should know that the ice cream shop is open.
Alder Groupie.
The Public Safety Committee continues to discuss the possibility of hosting an emergency management tabletop exercise with various members of city staff to review actions taken during the flooding last fall and suggested improvements for future action if need be. So once we solidify those plans, then we will be in touch to get it set up.
Actually, I have an update. on that if you'd like. I met with the police chief and Larry Reed from your committee to talk about kind of the best way to organize a staff tabletop, and we will be doing that on May 20th. And I'll kind of do a write-up of kind of the high-level comments that come out of that and provide an update to the council on that.
Okay, excellent.
Did you have anything else, Brian?
Just one other thing, we will have a contingent of staff and council members that will be representing Monona at the Clean Lakes Alliance breakfast this Wednesday morning, so.
City Clerk Andrews?
Open Book was very well attended this year. If residents do have, still weren't able to attend, they can certainly call the toll-free number for the assessor and discuss their assessments still up until the actual board of review hearing.
In terms of the Clean Lakes Alliance, I know Alder Moore and Alder Thomas are going. If either of you are interested in carpooling, I think everyone else will probably be coming from their homes.
Yeah, some staff will try to carpool possibly, so.
Okay. And I'm attending also, so let me know. The only other thing I had is this morning, Mark talked to staff at the staff meeting about the capital budget. So we're getting, unbelievably, we are already starting on that process. And he's going to be sending out, we've met and figured out a schedule, and he'll be sending out the instructions to staff. So we would like everything, all capital budget proposals to be considered at 2 committee meetings, hopefully. So you should be finding those on your agenda in coming months. I think that it's due July 31st to March.
Correct.
So.
Yep.
I think that's everything I had. The only other thing is appointments. Christopher Conrad to the Zoning Board of Appeals, effective immediately through April 2021. Wynn Davies as a first alternate to the ZBA, effective immediately through April 2021. And Corrine Fallett, is that right? To the Plan Commission, effective immediately through April 2021. Is there a motion to approve?
Move
those?
approval.
Second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Appointments are approved. Is there a motion to adjourn?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We are adjourned.